welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that the U.S. has the makings of a deal with China ahead of a tariff truce deadline of August 12th. Meanwhile, global markets have jolted after dozens of nations were hit with steep tariff rises, as Canada says a deal could be weeks away. Russia says that 3 people have died in Ukrainian strikes on the country, and Ukraine says it has hit Russia's Ryazan oil refinery. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has again confirmed that sanctions will be placed on Russia if there is no peace deal with Ukraine by his deadline. It comes as U.S. President Donald Trump says he's positioned 2 nuclear submarines in response to war threats from Russia's former President Trump and Dmitry Medvedev have traded taunts in recent days. Protests have taken place in countries including the US, UK and South Africa. As fighting continues in the Gaza enclave, it comes as the United States promises a new Gaza food plan, while the Hamas-run Gaza Civil Defense say Israeli fire has killed another 22 Palestinians. Meanwhile, the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff has met with families of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza nearly 22 months after they were seized in Hamas's October 2023 attacks, according to the hostages' main representative group. Indian officials have confirmed that India will continue to buy Russian oil regardless of the recent threats of penalties made by the US President Donald Trump. However, Indian Ministry of External Affairs nor White House has commented on this issue yet. Republic of Congo have agreed on the outline of an economic framework. As part of a wider peace deal, Rwandan-backed M23 rebels and the DRC military had been involved in deadly clashes, displacing large numbers from the eastern DRC population. Jordan's armed forces have killed 2 armed individuals after foiling an infiltration attempt from Syria into Jordan. According to the Jordanian military, the incident marks yet another escalation along the Syria-Jordan border in recent months. Families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas staged a protest in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square today and called for a ceasefire and the immediate return of their loved ones. These protests come after Palestinian terror groups Hamas and the Islamic Jihad released videos of 2 hostages being held in poor conditions. The protesters have urged the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to finalize a deal and ensure the unconditional release of all hostages. Let's listen into what some of the families of the hostages had to say.
666 ימים ש50 חטופים וחטופה עדיין בעזה. ביומיים האחרונים צפינו בסרטונים הקשים של רום ואביתר, היקירים שלנו שנמצאים בשבי. הילדים שלנו עוברים שואה. לעולם לא עוד קורה ממש עכשיו למתן שלי ולשאר החטופים. הם לא ישרדו עוד הרבה זמן. הם יכלו כבר כולם להיות בבית. אם ההסכם הקודם לא היה מתפוצץ בגלל פוליטיקה.
אני מתחנן בפניכם, אנשים שנוסקים בנידון, בנושא הזה, אל תהיו אפתיים. זה חיים, זה לא קמפיין, זה לא סיסמה. זה גורל של החטופים, זה גורל של בני אדם שחיים. הם לא עשו שום דבר. הם לא עשו שום דבר רע לאף בן אדם.
כמה סרטונים עוד נצטרך להסתכל, לראות, להרגיש, לבכות, מבלי יכולת יותר להקל את הסבל הבלתי נגמר הזה. עוד מעט אנחנו כשנתיים בתוך סבל שלא יתואר. 666 ימים של טראומה. לא זאת בלבד שהילדים שלנו נחטפו, חטפתם גם אותם.
Now we're joined by Ahmed Fattouh. He's a spokesperson for the Fatah movement, joined us live from Ramallah. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, with families of Israeli hostages protesting for a ceasefire and their loved ones released, how do you think such demonstrations are now influencing the political climate within Israel?
Thank you for having me. Of course, we all want the war to end. We all want this catastrophe to stop. We are seeing daily hundreds and thousands of people dying in Gaza. And we all want the swap of hostages and Palestinian prisoners all to be released. The one who's stopping the peace efforts and continuing the war are the Israeli political system. The far-right Israeli government that does not want to stop this war. They want to push for a colonial agenda, as they have said it and expressed it in many occasions, to exterminate and to forcefully immigrate the Palestinian people from Gaza and to annex the West Bank. So they see from this war that was started in October 7 as a gift for the Israeli far right to push forward into their Zionist dreams of fully occupying Palestine. Yesterday, President Trump, according to the Independent, said that it is Netanyahu who don't want to stop the war for his personal interest. Until now, the pressure has not built up enough to stop Netanyahu. The Israeli community is, unfortunately, the majority of it still far-right sympathizer and still against the Palestinian people. And what we are seeing from the TV, from the community leaders, that they are saying very racist and very extremist rhetoric. There's very few who are speaking about the two-state solution and peace. Now, we also have to address that Israel refused the New York two-state solution conference, which actually states and put forward a plan for a peaceful resolution, because we have to face the inevitable that this is an issue between an occupation and the occupied, and we need a permanent solution. So that pressure needs to build up, but most importantly, the United States need to step its foot forward, because until now they have been impartial, they have been biased, they have been complicit in this genocide. They are providing the bombs, the political cover. And I have to point out what Witkoff said yesterday, that there is no famine in Gaza. That is, of course, completely absurd. When the entire international community, when in UN, all its agencies, when humanitarian organization, including Israeli humanitarian organization like B'Tselem, says it's a genocide, there's a starvation, and just today 7 died from hunger, and he denying it. That reiterate what we have been saying for years, that America is not an impartial and neutral mediator. They are complicit, and the world need to find another mediator who could actually stop this war, not prolong it.
And Ahmed, now, given the ongoing conflict and the involvement of Palestinian groups like Hamas, also Islamic Jihad, what are the prospects for a ceasefire agreement? Is it still possible?
Of course, it's possible. I have to remind you that it is Israel that withdrew from the ceasefire deal in February and did not go for phase 2. Also, I have to remind you that it is Netanyahu who refused all proposals from the international community, or even the Arabic plan for ceasefire and reconstruction, when they said the PLO, which is the Palestinian government and the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, to go back to Gaza, and Hamas, we have all said clearly, Hamas need to withdraw from power and to give their weapons to the legitimate government, and to go for a two-state solution where we have an election for a Palestinian government that has no militants on the ground. One authority, one political system, one law, one arm, which is with the legitimate Palestinian security forces. Israel does not want that to take place, because Israel's plan is not a ceasefire or peace. Israel's plan is to exterminate the Palestinian state. They don't want any opportunity or any chance to have a political process that could lead to a Palestinian state, independent state, according to the two-state solution and according to the international resolutions. So what they are doing is keep feeding this war. And the entire world has already said, as I told you, in the New York conference, and Hamas has signaled that they want to step down from power, and they want to swap all hostages for prisoners. So all the solutions are before under our hands, but it's Israel that refused to pick them because they want a solution that is tailored to the occupation, that's tailored to the apartheid, to make a colonial state an apartheid system, which is internationally refused, and the Palestinians will, of course, will not accept to be slaves or third-class citizens under occupation forever.
Thank you very much, Ahmed Fatou, for always joining us and sharing your insight all the way from Ramallah. Now we move on to our next news. In Tel Aviv, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff has met with families of Israeli hostages held in Gaza. The emotional meeting took place at a protest square nearly 22 months after the Hamas attacks. Witkoff offered reassurance. He said that the plan is not to expand the war, but to end it. Families applauded his arrival, but pleaded for urgent U.S. action. Many have erected a barbed wire protest camp to highlight the hostages' harsh conditions. One family released a still image from a Hamas video showing their loved one pale and emaciated. The push for a resolution is growing louder and more desperate. Now we're joined by Matti Zweig. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Israel. Thank you, Matti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, with families expressing increasing desperation for an action, including the display of a barbed wire protest camp, how do you think public pressure within Israel is evolving? How do you see it? Do you notice a change from earlier?
Well, you know, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has met today with all the families of Israeli hostages, as you said, in the hostage square. It was not a hostage square, of course. Now it is for more than 1.5 years. And this is a desperate place because from one side, they understand the military pressure that they put on Hamas to release the hostages. From the other side, there has no been released, most of them. They were released in agreements. Only a minority has been released militarily. Everybody understands that. The question is that in all the rounds of intending to do some agreements in Qatar or in other countries, Hamas has said no, and they want to have this card for not to be dismantled as the last means of staying in power in some way. They want a complete deployment, redeployment of IDF or going back to Israel, things that they are not going to happen, not because Israel wants to stay with Gaza. I mean, I'm not talking about some extreme ministers that have said this or that. In the facts, in the ground, Israel is not taking any means to take Gaza back. They are going, they want also to redeploy for trying not to repeat the 7th of October. I think most of the people in the world don't understand. For Israel, there is a before and an after. Before 7th of October 23 and after. After that, we say, you can put who you want there. We don't care about the names, but we cannot hold any kind of hope that in any future, let's say the next 100 years, would be someone or something or a movement that is even close to Hamas behavior. And this is what is avoiding from finishing everything, because if they would release the hostages and they would deploy their weapons, everything will be finished, I don't know, in 5 minutes, but in 10 minutes, okay? So this is what is going on. The meeting between Witkoff and the families have been very painful, because today most of the families don't believe also in the real efforts of finishing something. They understand what is going on. From one side, part of the Israeli government wants to continue this war because they put themselves a goal of finishing completely the Hamas as a military movement, if they cannot do it as an ideological movement. And from the Hamas side, as I said in the beginning, they are not trying to finish in this, release the hostages and being themselves dismantled or having to go away from Gaza to other country, as it was in the 80s with the PLO that they left Lebanon to Tunisia, for instance. And this is what is happening now. It's very sad. The families of the hostages have been very harsh, also with Witkoff and also with the Israeli government, because they really don't know who to believe anymore. This is the truth.
And building on that answer, how do you assess the role of the U.S. in these negotiations? What more can U.S. still do to expedite a resolution here?
I mean, I said in other interviews, I mean, it's very hard to put pressure only to one side. If the world is putting pressure on Israel because it's the normal state with normal ethics and with normal way of behaving, and then all the pressure goes to Israel, don't this, don't do that, release everything, redeploy, give them what they want. I mean, this is not going to lead to any solution. And then Israel today has, and I think most of the Israelis believe, or total peace or total security. There is not something in between. Yes. And so until the world would not understand that they have to put the same quite amount of pressure that they put on Israel also on Hamas, maybe through Qatar, that is having a very strange mediation way of doing things, that they never put pressure on, real pressure, I mean, yes, on Hamas. Things are going to continue as they are now, and yes, we will see more bloodshed, yes, and more problems. Mm-hmm. And this is something I think that nobody wants, at yes, least from the point of view of the peoples.
Thank you, Maddie, for sharing that. We'll come back to you as we move on to our next news as well. Now, the UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy says the conflict in Ukraine is unlikely to be resolved within the next year, but negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv will likely continue. Speaking to The Guardian, Lammy said talks would probably still be underway a year from now, adding that much depends on how serious Russia is about engaging in them. His comments come after Russian President Vladimir Putin repeated Moscow's position that it seeks to address the root causes of the crisis and guarantee Russia's security. Putin also said Russia is willing to wait if Ukraine believes the time is not right for talks. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Matti Zweig. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Israel. Thank you, Matti, for staying with us now. Now,
Thank you again.
Thank you. Now, Putin's recent comments on Russia's willingness and feel the right time, or to wait for the right time for talks, suggest a protracted conflict. So how do you assess Russia's position, and can we still be hopeful towards a ceasefire within before the ceasefire deadline made or declared by President Trump?
Well, I think the commentary of Mr. Lammy, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of England, shows especially the contradictions that the Europeans have with Trump. Trump came to his new administration saying the contrary of everything that had been said and done in the last years from the Biden administrations and the European community, which is, let's do a lot of pressure to Russia, throw weapons to Kyiv. So weapons to let the Ukrainians defend themselves, and then let's show Russia that it's not for free to attack and to have a political gain and territorial gains only by attacking a neighbor. And then the administration, Trump administration, came and said exactly the opposite. They say, look, we have a lot of blood have been spilled. We have to stop this. We have to understand that what it was is not going back, like Crimea, for instance, or maybe some territories in the east. Let's do some kind of agreement and let's finish with this bloodshed. The facts have shown that nothing has happened, not to this side and not to the other side. And we have to understand that also for Russians, very strong Ukraine, it can be annoying for them, but it doesn't move them from their goals. And a very weak Ukraine, of course, even less. So from their point of view, they have goals to achieve and they continue with them, despite what Trump have said. And then probably nothing is going to change if the Trump administration is not going to change the tone towards Russia in some way or another. What they will decide, like new sanctions, more sanctions, or real sanctions, and not only talking about sanctions, because thousands of sanctions have been imposed on Russia, and many of them, they are not for real because, you know, about products, they get the products through third countries, about purchasing in the West or in other places, they do through companies in other countries like Dubai, etc. So, and everybody knows that. So for a real change toward Russia, there are too much interest. I also said in another interviews about the interest of Trump in the rare earths that he needs so desperately to have a kind of political leverage in front of China, who has most of the rare earths in the world, or exploit them in the maximum. And also the Russians want parts of the territories that have very important rare earths that today they are used in electrical cars, even in wind turbines and everything. And of course in military goals. So this is the situation. If Trump is going to change the tone and the way of behaving towards Russia, maybe things are going to change to one side or another. In other way, we are seeing only a war of words and not a change in facts on the ground.
Yes. Thank you very much, Maddie Zweig, for joining us and sharing your insight throughout our news. Now we move on. A U.S. appeals court has upheld a temporary ban on federal immigration arrests in Los Angeles without probable cause. The court rejected the Trump administration's request to pause the order, stating that arrests based on appearance, language, or location likely violated constitutional rights. This comes as earlier protests against immigration raids had taken place in Los Angeles after ICE officials had raided several city locations to arrest individuals allegedly involved in illegal immigration to the United States. The American Civil Liberties Union and several Southern California cities had sued federal agents, accusing them of racial profiling and unlawful tactics. The court agreed blocking arrests based solely on race, ethnicity, or speaking Spanish. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass called the ruling a victory, while the ACLU said it confirmed the administration's actions were unconstitutional. Now we're joined by Dr. Vipul Saxena. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Dr. Vipul, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. So now the court's decision directly challenges tactics used by federal agents during recent raids. So how might this ruling affect federal immigration policy and the future approach to enforcement in cities like Los Angeles?
I think what U.S. administration currently doing is something which is not within the framework of immigration laws, because so far people have been having freedom of expression, and which has not been prohibited or any kind of embargo in the immigration policy. So under the banner of immigration laws, such orders cannot be passed and that is what has been upheld by the lower court and also the higher court. So I think sometime U.S. administration will have to think about it, that just because people staying in the U.S., if they're talking something against the government policy or against government actions, they just can't throw them out of the country, or they can't raid on the immigration part. Unless they have broken the immigration rule, yes, then you have a right to they take whatever action within the framework of law. But just because somebody has posted something on a social media against the current administration's policy or actions, you cannot go around hunting them on the grounds of immigration.
And thank you, Dr. Vipul Saxena, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you all for our next discussion. Now we move on. In Mali, former Prime Minister Moussa Mara has been detained and charged over a social media post criticizing military rule. Mara is among the few voices publicly opposing the military government's decision to dissolve political parties and extend its rule without elections. Led by Colonel Assimi Goïta, Mali's junta recently secured a 5-year term, which can be renewed indefinitely. Mara's post expressed support for jailed government critics. He was later barred from attending a peace conference abroad. He now faces charges of spreading false information and undermining the state. His trial is set for September 29th. This comes as Mali battles rising insecurity. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Dr. Vipul Saxena. He's a geopolitical expert. Thank you, Dr. Vipul, for staying with us. Now, why was he targeted? Was he accused of anything other than his recent post on X?
Yeah, so I think with the action which has been taken against this ex-Prime Minister, I think this is something to withdraw or I would say put an embargo on freedom of speech by the government, being a political opponent. I think that's not fair. That is against the Geneva Convention, where freedom of speech has been made one of the topmost or key human rights. And yes, if somebody is there are clauses in that if somebody is trying to incite violence or incite some kind of religious rivalry, I think those are the cases where government has some riders over freedom of speech. But as long as it is just criticizing a government or criticizing the government's actions or policies, this does not come under any kind of crime, which can be really dealt with with this kind of action which Mali government has taken. So I think Mali government is going too far from the basic humanity laws or human rights laws, which need to be re-looked into. Otherwise, they will definitely face some kind of internal unrest if they continue with this kind of treatment to the people, especially of the stature of ex-Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much, Dr. Vipul Saxena, for joining us and sharing your insight as a geopolitical expert. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to